My action research project was on computer-based instruction and standardized reading scores. Reading is considered the most influential of the academic skills, and it has been highly linked to student academic achievement. Technology, introduced several decades ago, has had a great impact on teaching and learning. Specifically, technology it provides access to adaptability, availability, motivation, and to quick data. One would think that technology would have a positive impact on instruction and learning. Therefore, I decided to test that using two classes of my English students. Looking at our school's reading data for the last 3 years, even though technology had been introduced back in the 2011-2012 school year, the data shows that reading achievement scores went down. So I wanted to go back and see what exactly was happening in this area. So my hypothesis that I tested was computer-based instructional time increases, then standardized reading scores should increase as well. There is much literature to support this hypothesis. For example, Kulik and Kulik, in their meta-analysis that they did, reported that 81% of studies showed improved assessment scores when technology was introduced. Chung and Slavin reported, however, that there was a threshold to be met, that on average the increase only occurred when there was 75 minutes or less time using technology in the classroom. There's also the multisensory issue involved with technology. Devlin, Feldis, and Bentram reported higher critical thinking by students, also more responsive answers to their questions, and more informative directions by students. In other words, because we were not just using visual but auditory and tactile instruction, students were more involved in their learning. Sarin also reported higher problem-solving skills by students because technology provides a means for them to actually delve deeper into their content. There is, however, issues with alignment. For example, Clark, Madura, and Dede discussed the needs for similar methods of assessment and instruction. In other words, if we're going to teach students using technology, then we should also assess them using technology. Otherwise, there is a disconnect in what they have learned and how they can demonstrate it. White and Gillard discuss the pedagogical and intrinsic gains from interaction and feedback. Technology provides students with immediate feedback when it's used correctly. Therefore, they're able to correct or redirect their learning. Means listed areas of instruction and assessment alignment specifically in 3 areas. Consistent instructional vision. Technology, because it's not human, won't veer off course the way a teacher would. Principal support. There is much support for technology in education today. And when the principal's on board, then the whole school can be aligned in this direction. And also teacher collaboration. Teachers can work together through technology tools to make sure that students are getting what they need. So for my action plan, I decided to use 2 of my English classes, standard 10th grade English, and test whether or not instruction with technology is better than traditional instruction. My first period students, there were 26, and my 8th period had 32 students. Both of these, again, were standard 10th grade English classes. The methodology was comparative experimental. I decided to put my first period on a technology-based instruction using activelylearn.com, which is a web-based program that provides embedded supports for students, such as vocabulary and annotations and links to multimedia supports. My 8th period worked on literature through more traditional means, such as direct teacher instruction, using the textbook, and teacher-made activities and assessments. The data for this, pre-data was going to come from their STAR 360 reading scores, which was initially given in August of that school year. I was going to check a benchmark assessment through again Star 360, which was given in January, and then I was going to use their ACT Aspire data in reading to post-test. Pre-research, the Star 360 scores for my students in first period, they averaged 748 out of 1,500. And my eighth period averaged 718 out of 1,500. So their pre-assessment scores on the Star 360 were similar. The methodology, again, first period activelylearn.com and eighth period traditional instruction. After speaking with my administrators and my technology integration specialist, we decided to make a few changes, however, once the research project got going. For example, we decided not to use the ACT Aspire data. There were several reasons for this. One is that that particular year was the last year Aspire was going to be used to assess 10th grade. So we felt like when we got that data, it would actually be moot because we would not be able to compare it to any other school year. There was also missing data. When we went back to look at the students' previous scores, several students' grades were missing for various reasons. It could be that they had transferred in from another school or anything like that. But there was even 1 year of data that was missing altogether. And also because the students themselves had variable reading instruction in the past. Some students had been in explicit reading classes and some had not. So we decided not to use that Aspire data, but instead use another round of Star 360 scores. We also decided to exclude special education student scores. A couple of reasons for that as well. Number one is that there were uneven numbers in the classes. The eighth period class had 3 times as many students in the special education program as did first period. So we felt like those student scores may skew the results. Also, special education students at this school are required to take a fundamental reading course. And we did not want that, again, to skew the results of our analysis. For the results themselves, once the school year had ended, the first period students, we wound up with 17 students whose data we used, and those students actually lost an average of 112 points between August and April in their Star 360 scores. Eighth period students, we wound up with 16 students, and their average scores increased by 303 points. So there was a 400-point difference between scores in first period, which were taught through activelylearn.com, and students in eighth period that were taught through more traditional means, which seemed to show that computer-based instruction led to lower reading scores, which nullified our hypothesis. So again, in sitting down with administration, we looked at these results and we discussed possible reasons. The first reason we came up with is our Systems One-to-One initiative, which was implemented in the 2012-2013 school year. So the students that I had during this particular research project had only had one-to-one device access for about 5 years. We felt like this meant that those students were not originally taught to use technology as a main source of instruction. They were not taught fundamental reading through technology. They were taught fundamental reading the old-fashioned way with paper and pencil and books. So we felt like this made their view of technology a little different from probably what it should be for this to be effective. Also, technology offers distractions, especially at the secondary level. When students have their computers out, they want to be listening to music while they're reading. They want to be flipping back and forth between several different websites at one time, instead of just having access to the one assignment that they're supposed to be working on. We also talked about the Star 360 itself. And while it can be a very valid source of assessment data, we felt like it's really not for our school. Our students take this assessment 5 times during the school year. And also, there are no incentives or consequences for this exam. The test is not in any way tied to any grades, any rewards, any consequences. So we felt like students probably did not do their best on the assessment, especially towards the end of the year when they were tired of taking it. Possible solutions for our school, we discussed professional development. Teachers need to be retaught how to teach. In other words, they need access to development and how to use technology as a reading instructional tool and not just a form of entertainment, which seems to be typical in the high school setting. We also talked about student development, and again, how the students we have now have not always had this type of access to instructional technology. So we feel like as students progress and we get some of those younger students in the high school in years to come, because they have been initially taught differently, they will be more ready to take on this type of instruction. We talked about an incentive plan for the STAR 360. If we're going to use this as a form of assessment, we need to make it relevant for the students in some way. Otherwise, the data is not going to be as accurate. And then we talked about patience. Any kind of change is not going to happen overnight, at least not successfully. So we felt like the teachers and the administration needed to be patient in implementing this type of program because it's a large program. It encompasses so many areas of the school, and reading encompasses every part of the school. So we felt like we needed a little patience, give the teachers time to adjust, give the students time to adjust, and then hopefully we would see the kind of numbers that we hoped to see. The other project that I chose to present was the Unethical Behavior of Educators project. I felt like this was a very timely project right now, as it seems at least once a week we have been seeing something in the media about a teacher getting into trouble for some sort of bad decision. So this begins with the question, what is professionalism? Well, according to the Alabama Quality Teaching Standards, there are 6 areas that encompass professionalism. There is collaboration, or being able to work with other teachers and administrators as well as students. There is continuous lifelong professional learning. Education is ever evolving, and so teachers need to evolve as well. There is Alabama-specific improvement initiatives. Because we teach in Alabama and we do not want to be complacent, we need to be able to constantly work towards improving ourselves. This also falls into the 4th one, school improvement. Again, no complacency. We've got to be able to make ourselves better, to make our students better, which makes our schools better. Ethics, just knowing what is right and wrong in regards to what is good for students, what is legal and what is right. And then local, state, and federal laws and policies. These have been put into place to provide that line that teachers should know they cannot cross. Social networking has had an impact on teacher ethics. Communication through technology has dramatically increased in the last 2 decades. And because it is the student's preferred form of communication, it's necessary for teachers to be proficient in communicating this way as well. However, teachers are human, and so there needs to be that balance of educators' responsibilities and rights. We have the same freedom of speech as everyone else, but we need to be sure that we understand that what we say is seen and heard by all of the little people that we have sitting in front of us every day. Sexual behavior in education. Statistically, nationally, between 8th and 11th grade, there are 3.5 million students who have reported physical sexual contact with a school employee. And there are 4.5 million students who have reported non-physical sexual contact with a school employee. This is totally unacceptable. There should be no sexual contact between school employees and students. As far as Alabama, although we rank 23rd as far as most populous state in the country, we rank 9th in most reported educator-student sexual cases. That is a tremendously high number. Also, we have the highest educator-student relationships per capita in the nation. We have got to make teachers aware of this issue and figure out a way to make it work. So there needs to be explicit professional development as far as boundaries and barriers, technology, and how it affects all of this, teenage brains, and the school culture itself. Our society in general is more lax about sex than it has ever been, but that cannot bleed into the school culture. There is also cheating on state assessments that has been an issue, especially with our friends just to the east of us not too long ago. There's tremendous testing pressure on educators between No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top. There's always fighting for more school funding. And so we need to make teachers aware of this and make sure they're aware of the consequences so that hopefully we can reduce that number. Degrees of cheating. First degree cheating is willful and premeditated. I don't think that happens a lot in education, although we have seen it happen. Second degree cheating is casual attempts to help students. This is probably something that happens more often than we'd like to admit. Third degree is indifference, recklessness, and negligence. If we see it, we need to report it. It's not something that we can just turn a blind eye to. And statistically, in a 2010 study, more than 50% of teachers have admitted to either cheating or knowing someone who did. And that is not the kind of example that we need to set for our students. So the recommendations are that intensive, explicit professional development happen across the board. Unethical behavior comes from both offenders and bystanders. And so for the sake of our students, all educators need to know what unethical behaviors are and how to recognize them. They need to know what is right legally and ethically for our students, and they need to report what is wrong for the well-being of our students, because we are the role models for our students, and we need to set the kind of example that they need to follow. Thank you.